Welcome to Coffee and Conversations, mini episodes by victims and villains. I am your co-host, Captain Nostalgia, and I am joined by...
Hey, it's Micah. I normally co-host the Cage Corner podcast.
Yeah, so this is exciting. This is the first in-universe crossover that we've ever done.
I guess you're right. That's kind of weird.
Yeah, and what a great occasion to do it for. We just got done doing the 1983 movie Valley Girl, and they remade it in 2020 with Jessica Rothe from All My Life and the two Happy Death Day movies. And I don't know. I think we might have ended up on different sides of this coin.
I don't know. I don't know. I think we both liked it.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and just jump into general impressions of this movie.
Yeah.
I'm going to make the bold statement right up front. I enjoyed this vastly more than I enjoyed the original Cage version.
Sure. Aside from the presence of Nick Cage, everything about this movie is better. Pretty much.
This movie functions better.
Well, okay. I do have one big frustration, and that is that, and this is not just the fault of this 2020 film, but a lot of newer properties, in the recent years, where, we're going to do a period piece about the 80s or 90s, and then it ends up really being kind of a caricaturization, if you will. It ends up being, over-embellished version of that era, or movies of that era. So it's oh yeah, everything about this looks 80s, but they kind of miss the mark. It doesn't feel like the 80s. Immediately, we were watching the movie, and within 5 minutes, my wife was like, where are all the mullets? Yeah. Because the majority of the cast in the 1983 version, which is obviously from the 80s, so many of them actually had mullets. And it was just like the main character, she had an 80s hairstyle twice in the movie.
Yeah.
And there were things like that. It was just I really wish this felt more, of era. But anyway,
we can get into the costume design once we put the spoiler warning. But
sure,
talked about this while we were having dinner, where there's a couple boo boos in this. We were constantly checking throughout this movie.
Yeah, the soundtrack especially, because some musicals are my favorite type of film, and something that Josh really praised in the first movie was the soundtrack. So I was going through every single song that popped up that wasn't an original. I was like, all right, what year did this come out? Because it's supposed to be set in the early 80s. So
they're pretty vague about that.
Yeah,
too.
You figure it's okay, before 85, because 85 is the token mid 80s.
Yeah.
And everything pretty much checks out. Every song is from 80 to 84. So
I think it's really interesting that this movie, thing that I came across that I found fascinating was the fact that most people know Jessica Rothe from Happy Death Day, and Happy Death Day takes place at college. She takes place in high school.
Yeah,
she plays a high schooler in this, and so it's kind of well, how is that a thing? At least to me, it was weird. But this movie sat on the shelf for 3 years.
Yeah,
and in those 3 years, she's had 3 movies: Happy Death Day to You, and All My Life, where she's played a college student or someone that's early in their years of marriage. So she's playing adults, and here she's kind of playing. But they never once kind of feel like high school, because it's really vague.
Yeah.
The way that they portray the kids kind of being, quote, high schoolers.
Yeah.
It's really vague because you have...
see them on a high school campus, but...
But, you never see them, in class.
No,
it's
you don't.
So, I always feel like the high school aspect of this could be oh, yeah, it's it's a college thing. Or, a community college at least.
Yeah. Yeah, you're not wrong, yeah.
Let's get into spoilers now.
Sure.
First thing I think that we should address is the legacy cameos.
Yeah.
And this Elizabeth Daily, who we talked about in the Cage Corner episode, plays one of the best friends, and then the original Julie comes back, Deborah Foreman. How did you kind of feel about these two cameos coming back?
I loved that they were brief. I was like, this is really cool. I'm glad they're because they did, honestly, and I was saying, like, my biggest praise for this movie is, like, it is a very true-to-form remake. It pays very good homage to the original film while still standing on its own two legs. And so the fact that, like, you have two characters that are in the original, like, friend group, including the original star of the first film, and they come back for, like, 60 seconds, maybe.
It's very brief.
Very, like, I almost didn't realize the second one. And then we, like, double-checked, and we're like, yep, that was her. And it's really satisfying because it's not more than it needs to be.
I always like it when you have a property that is remaking something that's recognizable or that has a fan base, and you're paying homage to that.
Yeah,
and especially here, like, I mean, they're quite memorable cameos. I would argue that, like, Daly is the more of the rememberable one
for sure.
in this one, because, like, she's at the party and she's like the equivalent of, like, Amy Poehler from Mean Girls, where, you know, she wants to be cool and hang out with the kids, but, you know, she also wants to drink and kind of be that responsible. But it was like it's like very brief, like, it was shot where you see her and then the camera kind of pans out to the rest of the party. But very brief, very, very memorable. I think that they did a good job with hers over Foreman's, because Foreman's is kind of like a blink and you miss it kind of thing. Yeah,
it really is. It really is. Like I said, like, it took me a second. I was like, is that who I think it is? But yeah, like, this movie, there are even there was a line that it was just like, oh, shoot, I don't remember what it was, but they're on the beach and one of the girls is talking about this boy that she likes or liked or whatever, and she was saying that, like, his body's hot, but, like, he has nothing going on in his head, like, that kind of thing. And like, the line that she uses to portray that is almost identical, if not the same line that's used by, I guess, what could have been her corresponding character in the original film. And there are, like, little things like that. There's, like, you know, where do you want to go? Anywhere. What do you want to do?
Everything.
Anything. Yeah, and they bring back that, and then they rephrase it where at the end of the movie Julie says it, and she's like, where do you want to go? Anywhere. Or everywhere. And she's like, what do you want to do? Everything. You know, and it's really, really awesome, tight homage to the film.
So this one also too, when we're still on the subject of legacy, it's either a remastered or, like, almost a reshot version of the intro montage to Hollywood Boulevard.
Okay.
Where
that's right.
You're kind of getting to see that strip of, like, all of, like, Randy's world, and they have a couple of new things kind of thrown into it, but, like, that was a nice, like, homage to really bring back, because that captures Randy's world so well. Yeah, they're just driving down the strip. They're in their convertible. He's, like, yelling at people, and you see the same people or the same kinds of people and the same just, like, setup as the original movie. You see a movie theater marquee with Rocky Horror. Like, it's great. It's awesome. Well, we're going to jump into spoilers.
Yeah.
Micah's previous comment about the end of the film. There's absolutely no spoilers.
No, true.
It's just
a line.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But this movie, what sets it apart from the original is that it is an 80s musical. How did you... So there's two things that make this film significantly different than the original. And the first one is that it's a musical, whereas the first one wasn't.
Nope.
And then you have the second one where it's kind of like, I like how you put it, it has a Princess Bride structure to it.
Yeah, it does.
How did you feel about, let's start with Princess Bride, like, how did you feel about the story within a story kind of feel with Alicia Silverstone and her daughter?
Well, first of all, just the fact that, like, Alicia Silverstone, like, I don't know how old she is, but it's just like, oh, look at you. It's amazing. It's beautiful. Like, I just want to watch Clueless right now. It's so great. Yeah.
They made a Clueless connection. Did you catch it?
I did not.
So the end, when her daughter is leaving and the story is, like, concluded, and she's, like, reminiscing, she says something along the lines of, like, well, totally, like, that's actually or either totally or as if, that's actually a line back to
that makes sense.
Clueless.
But it's still, like, real vague because it's like, hey, that's a Valley saying, you know.
Yeah.
But anyway, like, I really. I love the format, honestly. It's weird. It's not for every movie. Like, for example, The Princess Bride. Like, as a kid, remembering that movie, I never remember the grandpa and his grandson. I only ever remember, like, all, like, Andre the Giant and Carrie Ewells and stuff. And so, like, as much as I love that movie, I feel like that movie doesn't necessarily need that format to be the beauty that it is. But this movie, it's really cool because our biggest problem with the 1983 Valley Girl is its lack of context. You're provided no plot or context until like the second act.
Yeah.
But this movie starts with, you know, a girl goes through something traumatic. You assume it's a breakup or something.
Oh, it is a breakup.
Yeah, and she sits down with her mom, Alicia Silverstone, and her mom is like, "Let me tell you a story about like when I lived in the Valley in the early 80s." And it's like, okay, here you go. You have context. You have like her mom's going to tell her about a relationship, about a breakup within a relationship, about, you know, the whole thing, you know, because you still have they didn't call him Tommy, they called him Mickey in this movie. But, well, you still have the like other guy, you know, sort of dynamic, the prom king guy. And, it's great.
I really think that this movie flowed more naturally with that approach.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, it doesn't feel like at all forced, because when we kind of get introduced to this movie, it opens up on a punk show.
Yeah.
Which feels very weird. The only problem that I have with the structure that they ended up taking with her telling the story was the fact of how vague the ending was. Well, what happened to Randy?
Sure.
Life happened.
Yeah, they didn't end up staying together, like, etc. And it's like, okay, honestly, I agree with you. I don't like that, but at the same time, like, that's really realistic.
Yeah.
It just is. Like,
but you've given all this detail and all this context for this story.
Yeah.
And then you're just like, and it's like, again, it kind of goes back to our problem with 83, where you're like, we're going to pitch a punk rock version of Romeo and Juliet,
right?
And just not flesh out these characters. That's kind of what it felt like to me.
Yeah, I mean, I see what you're saying, but it's also like, ultimately, it's this mom, Alicia Silverstone, talking to her daughter about a breakup.
That's fair.
I mean, in the long run, like, you don't have to like it, but like, that's really what it kind of needed to be.
Yeah, and the musical version too. Like, I stated this in our Cage Corner episode, but I grew up on the music of the 80s.
Sure. Yep.
More so than I did the music of the 90s, I would argue.
Not I.
And that's kind of my comfort zone.
Sure.
Like, it's the music that, like, if I don't know what I want to listen to, like, there's Spotify playlists that I have specifically saved.
Yeah. That
I'm just gonna hit shuffle, and all the 80s music, like, just give it to me.
Yeah.
And I love the way that the music is, as far as like a musical. I just feel like it captures and gives out a brand new energy that the first one really lacked.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. It felt like I pointed out the fact that, like, I'll Stop the World, that song, is used like twice in the first movie, and there's no reason for it. But that song ends up sort of being a theme for this movie, and it makes a lot of sense that they brought it back at the end.
Fun fact for you, the movie was not originally supposed to be called Valley Girl.
Oh.
It was actually going to be called, for this cut, was going to be a remake, but they originally were going to call it Melt With You.
Huh.
But
is that too on the news?
No, after the test screenings, people were like, this is Valley Girl. Like,
it is.
Call it for what it is.
It really is. It is a true blue remake. It is like, and I said this to Josh, like, there are movies with much higher budgets than this that were remakes that if they were good movies, fine, but they weren't good remakes by comparison. Like, this movie, as a movie that pays homage to an original, it is beautifully done.
Also, I think what makes this movie better is the more problematic elements in 83 that we had with subplots going nowhere, parents being creepers.
Yeah.
Like the friends just really kind of leaning into the, unhappiness, like just neglectful, like mental health angle. Like, all of that seems to like cease here.
Yeah,
the
true.
friends seem like a lot better off for her.
Yeah.
Like, granted, there is the chick from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. that's in this, Chloe something.
Yeah.
But she seems to be like kind of like that Queen Bee, like Regina King archetype that we've seen 1,000 times in movies like this.
Sure.
And they never kind of really flesh out some of the other characters around her, but that's a small complaint. But I think a lot more of the problematic elements that existed here in the first film, kind of like they realized that, and they were like, all right, we're going to remake this for a newer generation, a newer audience, and it's not going to have those. And so where you have those taken out, I think the absence of those like makes the musical element of it a lot more natural and adds substance and substitution for those elements. How did you feel about Randy actually being a punk rock musician?
I was going to talk about that next, actually. I think that made it made a lot more sense. It made like sort of the comeback of the film, like the prom scene, just a lot smoother, made a lot more sense there with him actually like playing music at the prom in that scene and stuff like that. And like, it really brought home, like they use the term punk rock in this film multiple times. They talk about the band X. There's like a girl with a homemade Sex Pistols shirt. Like they make a Sid and Nancy reference. Like the scene that they portrayed, like early 80s Hollywood punk, is so much more tame than Hollywood punk was at that time. But a lot about this movie was a lot about the themes were a lot more on the nose of like, this guy is into punk music and this is what that is. And this is why that's threatening, that kind of thing.
Yeah. 83, you kind of didn't have that element. Like they were kind of just like, he dresses different than us.
Right.
He must be a bad guy. Whereas this one, we were talking about this during the movie where you were telling me about how like more violent punk rock was. Like there's a point in the movie where Rob Herb Hubel, who plays David the father, and this is like watching a documentary or like a Nightline special where it's like punk rock, the dangers of it, or the threat of punk rock.
Yeah.
And so it illuminates a little bit more light to that, and it makes that feel like more natural. Yeah. Whereas, it feels like not as like shallow, but whereas the first film felt more shallow. Yeah. Where it's like he dresses different than us. You can't be with him. Whereas this one is like he comes from an actual like broken family. Like his dad walked out, his mom kicked him out so that she could have a legitimate family, and basically like he's playing shows in order to like make ends meet and spends all this time, actually rebelling against the system. Like they fleshed him out to make him feel like a legitimate threat.
Yeah, they did. I mean,
black sheep.
Gosh, like he talks about train hopping. He talks about playing CBGBs. Like he talks about like the booming scene in East Side New York at the time, which was all like a legitimate thing. Like it's really, really cool. It's really, really cool how much they flesh that out. Like the movie doesn't feel as genuine or as punk as it could.
It does a lot better job than 83, though.
But it does a lot better job than the original. It is a lot more on the nose. There are things that I like honestly hated, like the fact that Julie's character at one point is like, technically punk rock is dead. It's like, don't do that. That's don't do that. That's terrible. That's tacky.
There's also too, I think, when you're making something in that time period, you're trying to capture what you're seeing.
True.
So whereas the advantage of this remake is you have
the history, all
the history that has shaped and made punk what it is today.
Yeah, you absolutely do. You have like that Sid and Nancy reference, for example, is a lot more accessible.
Yeah.
And stuff like that, and and it brings like a lot of the new wave stuff into a little bit better of a light, because new wave and punk are like they're kind of bedfellows in their own right, you know. And yeah, it's really, really cool. Yeah.
So while you had something that you hated about how this film kind of hated punk rock at times, can we talk about the fact that Logan Paul is in this movie?
Oh my God.
And just how much he brings this film down. Like, he doesn't have a whole lot of scenes.
Sure.
Thank God.
Yeah.
But, man,
let's be honest, though. Like, he plays that character the way the character needs to be played.
He does.
Like, it's a typecasting of all typecastings. You know you hate that character because you hate that actor. Like, from the get-go.
Yeah.
You're kind of given no choice.
Yeah, and I don't know. Like, there's really no chemistry between him and Roth.
No.
So it's like, that feels like so forceful. Also, who asks someone to the prom by getting 5 guys to moon her?
Yeah. It was funny, but it was stupid.
It's just, it's some of the
but that
cringiest moments.
That joke, though. She's like, I got asked to prom by 5 assholes.
She's not wrong.
It's so funny. Oh, man, it's beautiful.
His character, like, it felt so weird for two, like, you're like playing all this homage,
yeah,
and you pick his character to change names for. Like,
that is very true.
That's one thing I didn't get, and I just did not like him in nearly any scene.
I think they did it for the song. I think that it did it so they could introduce him as Mickey. Like, hey, Mickey, you're so fine. You're so fine. You blow my mind. Hey, Mickey. And that song was like
kind of tacky.
It was tacky, but it was like, it was era appropriate.
Sure.
It was done by cheerleaders. There's like a light Bring It On reference. I know you love that movie.
God, I love that movie.
You know, like, it is what it is.
Doing spirit fingers.
Not only that, but I'm going to be a little bit more prone, as a Doctor Who fan, I'm going to hate somebody named Mickey way before I hate somebody named Tommy.
Fair. Fair. I guess, like, really, like, one of the last things that really talk about is, how do you feel like this film stacks up against the original?
Okay. There is actually one other thing I dislike about this film.
Okay.
And then I will just go ahead and answer your question. The only other thing I didn't like about this film, and it's in a pretty pivotal scene, but like, and it is well done, but it's also not. But like, the end in the prom where like, you don't see the stage, and what's her name? Julie's walking away from it, and all you hear is like, Randy start to sing, I'll Stop the World. It's really, really great, but leading up to that, there is no dialogue or anything hinting at that he's going to go back and get her. He and Jack and...
Really? You didn't think that he was going back? And
No. I knew that he would go back, but on like a writing level, there is nothing at all to indicate that he was going to go back.
You're also looking for the name Sticky. That's the guy.
Sticky, thank you. Yeah, like, there is nothing indicating that he's going to go back, and then he's all of a sudden there. And it's a wonderful moment, but the writing is just a hair inconsistent. That's all I was going to say.
That's fair. I think for me, like, this movie, like, stacking it up against the original...
Yeah.
I normally, when it comes to remakes versus original properties, like we did on our Patreon, we did a episode where we did the Witches versus the Witches. So they did a remake of 1990 and 2020 version, and then we did Halloween, John Carpenter's and versus Halloween on Rob Zombie's side, and like there are always going to be things that I like. About
the remake,
mm-hmm. but necessarily don't like the remake over the original property.
Sure,
it's opposite on this one.
Yeah, for sure.
There's just so many things that I enjoy so much more about this movie.
Yeah,
I think Jessica Rothe, I talked about this briefly in Cage Corner. She just has such a likable presence about her.
Yeah,
that like just makes it really easy to just be charmed by her.
Yeah.
And her and I forget the guy's name that plays Randy. but the two of them just have really great chemistry.
Yeah, and he has a really great, like, his look is pretty tame as far as, like, the idea of punk rock goes, but this guy, like, looks like, I mean, he looks like early 90s Brendan Fraser, like, and it's just super satisfying and cool. Especially for kind of, like, the era that it's supposed to be about and stuff, because Brendan Fraser has done 80s-esque movies. But, you're totally right. I almost never, if I before have ever, liked a remake better than an original, and this one absolutely is better. It is more cohesive. The musical structure is a lot more my thing, but it's also just like thematic to the fact that like this valley girl is falling in love with a punk rock dude. It ties a lot together.
Also, you see the change and the evolution of their relationship as it goes on.
Yeah.
I think one of my favorite sequences in this movie is where they're on a break, Randy and Julie, and they end up she ends up going to the prom with Mickey.
Yeah.
And they show up for prom pictures.
Yeah.
And she like comes out in this like borderline like gothic yet like still like it's kind of like a nice collection of like styles where it's like still has that like Valley Girl pink, but also has that like punk rock black, and it just meshes together really well.
Yeah, it's great.
And but you see that evolution to her character throughout the entire thing, where like first time like we really see her, she's like Madonna, like material girl, like
man, that scene was so cool.
And then as she kind of progresses, like her fashion kind of gets a little bit more like alternative, and it kind of breaks the mold of like what we would expect from a quote unquote Valley Girl, or cliche girl of that era. And that's something else I think that this film does really well. It progresses very naturally.
Yes, it really, really does. I'd like to point out that dress is literally mesh and lace.
Yeah.
But anyway, for sure. I think like the given context, like the storytelling context of like Alicia Silverstone's character and stuff, is really befitting. It's really like, it makes a lot of the movie make sense. I think they like, it's just great. It's really great.
All right, so my last question before we get into ratings.
Okay.
How would you have felt differently about the fact of like actually swapping out the Alicia Silverstone character for Deborah Foreman, the original Julie?
It's hard to say. I think on an homage level, it would have been cool.
A little bit too meta.
It is quite meta.
There are a couple meta moments in this.
There are, and it's funny.
The cell phone one, I think, was my favorite.
Yeah. There are a couple meta moments, and it would have been very meta. I think that, like, I don't know. It's sort of like we talked about with the original movie, like the idea that, like, you didn't have Michelle Pfeiffer, so you didn't really have, like, a strong leading lady.
Yeah.
You didn't have a strong leading person. And I think that this movie, being a remake of perhaps a film that a lot of people, especially in 2020, wouldn't have, thought of.
Yeah.
I think Alicia Silverstone's presence was really good. I mean, she is a teen movie star.
Yeah.
And so I loved the choice. I don't know. I don't feel like that the original actress would have had the charisma, to be honest.
God, yeah, she does have the charisma.
You think so?
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, I'm saying Alicia Silverstone does.
Yeah. Oh, Alicia Silverstone. Yeah, she absolutely has this charisma and charm about her. And I think that, like, I like their choice. I don't think I would have changed that. If anything, I would have changed it. The only thing that I can give the original movie above this movie is the presence of Nick Cage. And so if Nick Cage had made some sort of appearance, like, that's the only other thing I really could have asked for.
That's fair.
Yeah.
I would probably echo that. I think we're right on the same page in thinking that we're on our thoughts for this movie. I think my complaints are a little bit differently than yours because you have a punk background and I don't.
I do. Yeah, I do. And like, yeah, I think if anybody listening to this finds out that this, or either finds out or has the ability to rip this onto a really, really nice VHS bootleg with like a slipcase or maybe even a fat case, as much as I hate them, I would love that, because I think that like the fact that we watched this movie and the quality we did, and the fact that we watched the original in a tape quality, like was really polarizing. And I think that this movie being an 80s film, if it had the quality of a tape, I think it might add a lot of charm and sort of like period even to the experience.
I would love to see that.
Yeah.
Just throwing that out there. All right, so let's go to ratings. We're going to do Rorschach ratings. This is you have 0 to 5. Halves are allowed. Would you like me to go first?
I would like you to go first. It's been the day of you going first.
I'm going to give this a 3.5, bro.
Same. Yeah.
3.5.
Same. It was a whole like letter grade, if you will, above the other one. I think that like, would I watch it again? Probably. Did I love it? I liked it a whole lot. It was a whole lot of fun.
I'm glad I bought it.
Yeah.
So I will definitely most likely be watching this again. Again, like the cast is great, the music is great. Logan Paul's another story.
Sure. I think it'd be a fun second watch through to try to find out any more like little things. See how detailed they really were, you know, in regards to like the period or making an homage, things like that.
I think they did a really good job with the we teased it at the beginning of the episode, but like the costume design for the like the costume party in particular that they go to at the beginning of the movie.
Yeah.
You have a lot of like popular 80s icons making appearances there.
Smurfs, Elliot from E.T.
Elliot, E.T. Yeah. You also there's another scene where someone goes into a room and actually has an E.T. poster. Don't know if you caught that.
Oh, I didn't. I caught it in the first movie. Man.
And then there's Frankie says relax. Frankie goes to Hollywood. That was a huge slogan.
Yeah.
The choose relax show like that they used to have, but yeah. So if you guys have seen the 2020 version of Valley Girl, let us know what you guys thought. Tweet to us.
Yeah.
Micah wants a VHS copy of it, so
yeah.
Orion, if you get a hold of this movie somehow, make it happen.
Yeah.
Because we live in an age where it's not uncommon for indie movies to get a VHS release.
Oh, dude, Mandy tapes are like 80 plus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yoga Hoser's got a release too. There's
I have that one. Yeah.
Possessor just got a release as well. You guys can check out our Possessor interview with writer-director Brandon Cronenberg. But that's going to do it for us. We'll be back in a couple of days talking about The Faculty to celebrate Super Bowl 2021. But where can people follow you online?
Yeah, it's going to be Mullet Stash, MULLETSTACHE, at Mullet Stash on Instagram. That's pretty much it. If you're a Reddit person, I'm pretty active on the VHS subreddit. I'll be honest with you, which has been kind of a recent development, but it's a lot of fun, and I'm tinyviking_ on there. Yeah, that's probably it. MicahKimber.bandcamp, Spotify. Yeah.
All right. Well, you guys can find us everywhere. We're Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Twitch, and Letterboxd as well. While you guys are at Letterboxd, follow me at Captain Nostalgia for my 2021 film journey. It's been going pretty interesting this year. Seeing some great movies and some I want to pluck my eyes out movies. So
stoked for some Nick Cage releases this year.
Yeah, we have a lot of beautiful Nick Cage releases. But you guys can go to victimsandvillains.net where you guys can find episodes of the Cage Corner podcast, all of links to our social media, more episodes of our main show, Victims and Villains, along with coffee and conversations, as well as movie reviews, and most importantly, our suicide prevention resources. It's the real reason we make it. So if you or someone you know is struggling, please click the link in our description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming, because we just want to let you know that you have value and that you have worth. So we're going to go listen to some Madonna, go spin some records, and drink some coffee. We'll catch you guys soon.